we'll just kind of bounce
Sure.
it back together.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for dropping in on the podcast. We'll get
Oh,
started.
no worries.
Hello, I am Deb Coviello, the Drop In CEO, and I'm so grateful you joined us on another episode of the podcast where I have the great privilege of meeting amazing people and sharing their insights with you. And along the way, hopefully, they inspire you. And just know we do this because we care about the CEO, C suite leader of today and tomorrow, because we simply want to help you navigate your challenges, your opportunities with confidence. And today I am grateful to share the mic with RJ Burr, is a third generation producer of American oil, born into the industry. He was on the first location before he could walk, and he was been fascinated by the production of oil his entire life. And within 3 months of graduating high school, he funded his first partnership and never looked back. RJ is the Senior VP Corporate Operations at Panex with a main focus on the Gulf Coast, and his companies have raised and deployed over 300 million in upstream development and have partnered with some of the largest oil and gas companies, namely Shell, BP, and Marathon, to develop several million barrels in reserves. It is my pleasure to welcome you onto the show, RJ.
Hey, Dave, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I am buzzy today. I have just enjoyed conversations. You are the end of my day, but it is going to be such an energizing conversation because, quite frankly, I don't know that much about your industry. So I'm inspired to learn new things. And to my audience, you know me, it's the Drop In CEO podcast. Whatever we can bring a CEO, a C suite leader onto the show, not only to share their stories, but some of their insights, it provides the best value to use. But RJ, I want you to give you the floor a little bit, share a bit about your backstory, and we'll get this conversation going.
All righty. Well, Deb, like we were talking about here a little ago, I'm a pretty simple story. The first time I consciously was taken to the oil field, I was 7 years old, and we went to Luling, Texas. It was one of those go to school with your dad days, and it was about 8 million degrees outside. And I remember getting out of the truck, and it, if you've ever been around an area that produces a lot of oil, it has a certain smell to it. And I'm not going to say it's pleasant. I mean, it's a kind of a rank smell if you don't know what it is. And Dad, what is that? He said, baby, that's money. And he took me to the field, and I saw the pump jacks, and I was hooked. I've been very fortunate that some people spend their entire life looking for their purpose. Some find it early, some find it late. I found mine at 7. Graduated high school, made my first sale 3 months out of high school, and I've never looked back. This is all I've ever wanted to do. Now, at that point in time, when I first started, I didn't know it was a family business. My grandpa was in it, my uncles were in it, my dad got in it, and so I just you don't pay attention to that. I just knew my dad did it, and come to find out that now that my boys are starting with me, I have a 23 and 21 year olds, putting them to work. Heck, I got the fourth generation of Burrs producing American oil.
Such a beautiful story, but I'm going to go back to 7 years old. Mind you, it's cool. Look what dad showed me. It makes money, sure, but there had to have been something a little bit more along the way to like you said, it was a gazillion degrees out. Yes, it smelled awful, but it was the smell of money. Was there anything else that drew you into the family business? Because so many people decide they don't want to go into the family business.
Mm, I don't know if it was something that was anything other than what my dad did. However, I truly believe that the good Lord gives everybody a couple of talents. It's just your job to find it. And one of the talents He gave my family was the ability to raise money. And so that's really what drew me to it. I don't know if it was just that, heck, I like being able to pay my bills. I like being able to do what I want to do. And so making money just seemed to be the right avenue to pursue. And that was an avenue that I knew worked.
Yeah, so let's go there though. It's a family business. What was it like working in a family business? I've heard horror stories and it could be the best of things.
It's a little of both. It's hard to sometimes divide the line between family and business. When you go over to your parents' house and eat dinner, business is talked. I mean, so it never really turns off. Now, from my standpoint, I was one of those guys that I never was a tell me, show me. I didn't. I didn't really like the teachers who said because I said so. I'm a pretty intelligent guy. Show me where I'm wrong, and I'll have no problem accepting it. I'm secure enough in who I am to have no problem with being wrong. I just want it right. And So I kind of challenged a little bit. I guess I'm a kind of a type A. And so if I had, if today's Jay could talk to 30 years ago Jay, I would have just said more, listen to them, they know what they're talking about. But I had to reach out and touch that stove a couple of times. And once you do that, then all of a sudden you wisen up. And so being in a family business, it's all I've ever known. So I wouldn't really know if it was good or bad. I've enjoyed it. I love that. Couldn't choose to do anything else. I'm bringing my kids into it. And so I have no, I mean, I did some research on it, and there's a reason that third and fourth generation businesses, when the younger generation comes in, they already have a college degree in that business. They've been around it their whole life for the most part. And so there's a reason that generational businesses tend to do better, because it's not something you're learning from scratch. You have it something, it's born into you. And then you learn through experience what to and not to do.
Such a beautiful story, but I'm going to go back to a little bit what we were talking about before we pushed the record button, is that you spent some time in business, but then you said you sold it off and then took some time off and then did something different. Can you go back and share a little bit about that transition for you?
Yeah, we kind of jokingly around to call it our first life and second life in oil. And my brother and I, my younger brother, when we started in business, my dad did everything. I mean, he wore every hat in the business. And it wasn't soon that we realized, look, one guy, regardless of how successful he was, it's hard for one guy to do everything efficiently in an oil company. There's too many moving parts. And so we split the business into two sides. One side was the funding and organizational side, and the other side was the geological and the field side. My first day in the office, my dad sat me at a desk, put a big old phone book in front of me, handed me a script and a phone, and said, have fun. And I started smiling and dialing, and I got on the fundraising side. My brother, on the other hand, when he started here a couple of years later, he went straight to the field. And that's where we spent the next 20 years honing our skills and helping build the family company. And that ended here, it was about 12, 13 years ago when Marathon Oil came in and bought our family company. And so we had built it, we had some tremendous success, and all of a sudden we're retired. As I said, I thought I was going to play on the PGA Tour. It took me about a month to realize that wasn't going to happen. And a couple of years later to go stir crazy. And we started Panex here, it'll be 8 years ago last month. And really, as you grow up, I've learned that a man truly doesn't become a man until he learns to trust himself. And now you always ask for opinions from other people. I mean, you seek validation or whatever you want to call it. I still call my dad when I have a question that I'm not 100% on. You always seek wise counsel. However, when you own your decisions, it's empowering. When you're the one making the decision and here's why you made it, well, that's really, I think that's the final step to becoming a man. And when I started my second life in oil, the big change I realized was pretty much in my first life in oil, I happened to be a salesman who just happened to be in oil. My second life in oil, I wanted more partners versus investors. And so I made the conscious decision to educate them on what we were doing and why we were doing it. And when they became part of the team and understanding exactly why we were doing what we were doing, it was amazing. I didn't have to add the zeros and commas to the amounts that they invested. They did. And so that it's just been, it's building a team. It's building a partnership versus a group of investors.
So let's put a spotlight on your company. What is similar or different to the family business? What did you preserve and moved into this? And what are you doing differently? You've already shared about partners, or is it just another oil company, or what makes Panex different?
What makes us different than most of them is we don't have to do it. I'm secure financially. I'm not looking for a cosigner. And so I really don't have to make a decision based on a financial need. And that's very freeing. Now, secondly, what most people don't understand, and here's where the education part comes in. If you talked about the oil market crash in 2020 and you just ask the average American, how did it affect the oil companies? Most people would say, it's Exxon. They can handle it. It's Shell. They can handle it. When in truth, your American oil industry is not Exxon and Shell. It's not your major companies. It's roughly 9,000 independent companies that average 12 employees or less. We produce 83% of the oil, 90% of the gas, and drill more than 90% of the wells domestically. And so when that market crashed, That was the group that was hurt. Now, heading into that crash, a lot of the companies now were formed in the last 20 years. Well, everybody at our company, the heart of this company, I cut my teeth at the end of the J.R. Ewing era of oil, the most ruthless cutthroat stage oil ever saw. And so they really didn't, oh, maybe some didn't have the experience. I'm not sure, but there was clear writing on the wall of what was happening. When you looked at supply, you looked at demand, you looked at replacement for oil, you looked at world events and everything was going. It was pretty clear that there was going to be an acquisition opportunity coming if you were right in your timing. And when you look at all the economic crisis in American history, in every case, there's one person or a group of people that come out of the other side looking like geniuses. And when you string their stories together, you really only find two common characteristics. One, when the crash happened, they were liquid. They had cash in hand and they could make a move. The second one is when their opportunity presented itself, they had the courage to push their chips in the middle of the table and make that move. And so with us seeing all of this going on, we got our cash ready. We knew that there was going to be a crash. There just had to be a catalyst. And whether you like President or Trump or not, he was the catalyst. And what he did by increasing our production to the levels that he increased them to, he changed the power structure in oil. All of a sudden, OPEC, who had set the prices for roughly 70 years, didn't have near the say that they used to in what the prices would be. And so we saw an economic war, for lack of a better term, between Russia and Saudi Arabia by them increasing production. They were going after the U.S. shale industry. And so knowing, not getting too far in the weeds, basically to put a fine line on it, your shale companies, for the most part, are highly leveraged. Most of them need at least $50 a barrel to pay their bills. If Russia and Saudi Arabia could push that price to $40, $45, a lot of those companies are now in trouble. There would be buying opportunities. Well, we thought that would take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to play out. Mm-hmm. And so we got ready and we were just sitting on the sideline waiting. And then all of a sudden COVID came. And COVID took what we thought would take 12 to 18 months and crunched it down into 30 days. And it culminated on April 20th when the oil markets crashed. And so all of a sudden you had a clearing of the playing field like it never happened in my career. And you had acquisition opportunities left and right. And so since that point in time, we kind of looked at it when it all happened. We had I tell my kids when they play ball, if something goes wrong, you strike out, whatever, something bad on the field happens. You have one moment after it happens to say, shucks, darn, dang, whatever you got to do emotionally to get it out of your system. Yeah. And then you move on and leave it there. And so when that market crashed, we had our oh shucks moment. And then we kind of looked at each other and said, okay, guys, this is what we're expecting to happen anyway. And so when everybody else started pulling in their sales, we opened ours up and started buying. And between then and now, we've made roughly 23 acquisitions and secured what we believe to be about 100 million barrels in reserve. And so how we look at it is don't listen to the words. Look at the math. Math does not lie. 1 + 1 will always equal 2. It'll never equal 1.9. It'll never equal 3. And if anybody ever tells you that, they're lying to you. And so not to get into an environmental debate, that's not what I'm trying to do. However, when you look at the math to alternative energies and you look at the math to oil and gas, there is nothing on the market currently that can economically or feasibly replace oil. And so when you know that, and knowing human nature like I do, if somebody had already invented something, they would have said something. They would have told somebody. But there's nothing even rumbling. We started studying solar panels 150 years ago. If we hadn't figured it out by now, unless there's a major breakthrough, we're not going to figure it out anytime soon. And so, I'll put it this way. I was at CPAC here about a year ago. And this kid from PBS comes up to me. He says, hey, you're the oil guy, aren't you? I said, yeah. He said, let me ask you a question. Who do you want to win in 24? I said, well, it depends on what me you ask. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you ask the everyday me who has to pay the same things that you do at the pump, I want Trump to win. And the reason I want him to win is he understands something that for some reason politicians don't get. He understands the fact that oil has to be at a certain price that it makes it worth the oil companies going to get it. However, it can't be too high to kill the consumer. And so we found a sweet spot between 60 and 80. I said, so if you ask the everyday me, I want Trump to win. I said, however, if you ask the oil guy in me, I want Biden to win. He's really, why is that? I said, look, keep ESG scoring it. Keep scaring people away from it. Keep telling everybody oil is the great evil. And while you do that, we're going to keep buying it. And when the bubble busts and everybody comes out from under the ether and realizes there is no getting rid of oil, the people that own the most of it are going to be sitting in a position of strength, aren't they? And he said, well, yeah. And so it's just knowing your industry. This is what we do.
So this has been absolutely fascinating for me, and that is why I wanted to get you on, because I had to go outside my comfort of who I normally interview. Absolutely fascinating. And some of the things that I pick up from what you're sharing is that you have to have somewhat of a crystal ball or be able to study history to be able to project what's going to happen in the future. Understand that things are cyclical, that you plan for risk, for when the oh heck or oh shoot happens. And there's a tremendous amount of resiliency built in based on all the experience and years of patterns and economic situations, global things. It's far more than just running a business. It's just almost being clairvoyant or trusting history and planning accordingly. It's just fascinating what you have to do.
Well, and it's looking at numbers. And just
Yeah.
just look at supply and demand.
Yeah.
Right now, we are currently running about 15 to 20 million barrels a day behind what we consume versus what we produce. They project that number to be over 30 million by 2030. Well, if that's the case, we should be producing more oil to replace the oil that we produced.
Mhm.
Well, at the same time, from 2013 till roughly last year, investment in upstream development to find more oil to reduce or to replace what we're already producing was down roughly 70%. We went from right at $1 trillion worldwide to a little over 300 billion. Now we might hit 500 billion this year. It's recovered a little bit. However, we're still almost 50% off where we were less than 10 years ago. And so you look at that and say, well, heck, we're not producing enough to replace what well, surely there's something out there to replace it. No, there is no alternative. Well, maybe demand's going to go down. Maybe that's going to stop oil prices from going through the roof. Well, then you realize 83% of the world's population is just now beginning to use oil. What do you think they're going to do? Once they begin to see the benefits that oil brings to their life, you think they're going to say, oh man, we're destroying the environment, let's stop using it? Or are they going to tell Greta to shove it and get more of it? Well, they're
Mm.
going to get more of it because what most people don't realize is that if the American dream was the fuel that has fueled America to where we're at, American oil has been the vehicle for the last 150 years.
It's fascinating.
The modern world was built on oil. Doesn't matter what facet of life you look at, there is oil involved in it. If you see poly, it's oil. Whether it's medicine, whether it's makeup, whether it's cosmetic, does not matter. It's made from oil. It is heck 6,000 barrels, 6,000 products from one barrel. It is completely ingrained in our lives, and most people don't know it. I think that's the biggest. If you ask me what the biggest failure of the education system is, it's stressing the importance of oil in our lives. It has created more wealth, brought more out of poverty, and lifted humanity more than any product we've ever used. Yet we've been told it's the devil for 70 years now. Why? Who
Mm.
stands to gain by killing oil in its abundance? Well, I was at CPAC here last year again, and I walk off stage and I happen to walk into Nigel Farage. Now, chances are he wouldn't remember. We had about a 3-minute conversation, but we were talking this topic, and I just said, it doesn't make sense to me. What they're doing doesn't make sense. And he looked at me and said, you cannot control abundance. You can control scarcity. Think about that.
Oh my
When
God, this
nothing
is
else makes sense,
fascinating.
frame that over it. And so you look at a product that is so vital to our day-to-day lives, yet we're being told to get rid of it. It makes absolutely no sense. Especially let's look at environmental concerns. When you have two products, natural gas and nuclear, that meet their goals, that they actually do burn hotter, burn cleaner, they're the best alternative energies we have. The infrastructure is pretty much already built in the United States. Most homes have a gas line run to it. You could put converters on every car, run a gas line to every garage. You no longer have to go to the gas station. You could fill up right there at your house. So you could, well, let's say we don't want to use natural gas. You mean we can run the most advanced submarines on the planet on nuclear power, and we can't do it here? And so when I look at the environmental argument, I think it's a false argument, because If your solution, if you want to save the world and your solution to save the world is that we have to destroy it first, then you're not a serious person. Because to do what the environmental movement wants us to do, we would have to pillage the earth for raw materials like we never have before. Most people don't realize you have to move 500,000 pounds of material to make one lithium battery. Well, how much environmental damage does that cause? The engines and the motor that have to move
My
that.
husband and
And
I have
so,
talked about this.
yeah, I mean, you just look at all the math and the math doesn't make sense. And then you frame it in that one little quote, you can't control abundance. Well, that's
It's
the only thing that seems
fascinating.
to make sense. But I do know this, regardless of what the political winds may be, we're always going to need oil until somebody, there's going to be some wizard or smart. Some kid's sitting in his mom's basement right now, and he's going to have some crazy idea, and it's going to work. Somebody will figure out the next level of energy eventually. Not right now.
There's something that you are absolutely fascinating, and I sincerely appreciate just getting your perspective on not only the business of oil and the economics and the political, all of this wrapped up. It's so important to our understanding. But one of the things you said is you can't control abundance, whereas scarcity you can. And so when we translate this into human nature for people out there, again, this is a fascinating conversation. But I know now when I live in a place of abundance, I know where I'm going. I'm creating a media company. I'm expanding my brand. I just believe in going bigger and higher reach. I'm not sure how I'm going to get there, but I am hard to control. But if you assume a not of an abundance mindset, a scarcity abundance, you kind of fall victim to the narrative and you kind of this do loop of, okay, I don't have enough, I shouldn't be investing, I'll be afraid, etc. And you put yourself in a box. And then you assume the narratives of others and you let that control you. But when you have an abundance mindset, it's hard for other people to control you. You're outside the lines. It's really important. So I want people just to kind of take that a bit of a soundbite. Do you have an abundance mindset? Because the sky's the limit, or do you take a scarcity one and you keep playing small? So I love that.
Well, I'm a very common sense guy. And it's one that I do think outside of the box. I'm pretty creative, but like I said a minute ago, 1+1 will always equal 2. And prime example, I have a lot of partners that my partners basically I call it the 3 S's. They live out of 3 piles of money. Their first pile is their sacred pile. That's the pile they pay their bills with. They take care of their family. Nobody touches that pile. Their second pile is their safe pile. That's the pile they put in gold. That's the pile they put in silver, in real estate, in assets that, yes, they want them to grow, but more important than it growing, they want to know when they come back to it, there's going to be just as much there. Their third pile is their speculation pile. That's the pile they play with me on. That's the pile they want to make multiples on 2, 3, 5, 10 to 1 on your money. Well, you remember the silver crunch here a couple years ago? Well, I had several partners that had several $1,000,000 in silver. And all of a sudden they realized they had it in silver certificates. All of a sudden they realized an asset that they thought was in their safe pile was just as manipulated as everything else. And they called me with a little panic. And so if my partners have a problem, I tend to have a problem. And so I'm chewing on, I'm trying to figure out, something I can tell them, something I can help, advice I can give them. And it hit me about 3 o'clock in the morning one night. I pop up out of bed, scared my dog. He tried to bite me. He scared my wife. She goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I figured it out." And so I run down, I start running numbers just to make sure. And she comes down, and a couple hours later, she said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Baby, name for me one product that half the population wants it free, half the population wants it $1,000,000 a barrel. Demand is longevity because there's no getting rid of it now. And you're going to get a fair price if you put your money into it." She goes, "You're talking about oil, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Every barrel is pulled on equally, from people that want it free to people that want $1,000,000 a barrel. And there's no getting around it." So now, if we weren't sitting on the oil, that's a little different when it gets in the company story and why I say this. But if you're sitting on the oil, that's what I tell my partners. Look, if you don't like the rat race, because the stock market doesn't make sense to me. When I look at it right now, nothing makes sense. Companies that should be going down are going up. Companies that are going up should be going down. And so if you don't like guessing and playing that crazy work, put your money in an asset that when you come back to it, it's going to be there. Put it in oil. What product out there is going to have more demand worldwide over the next 20 years? It's oil. And so if you're sitting on reserves and you're developing those reserves, that's what we do. My partners typically, and please understand, there's no eliminating all risk in oil. If anybody ever tells you that it's guaranteed, they're lying to you. Hang up and run the other way. However, with what we do, we drill the safest kind of wells you can drill. And my partner, typically their biggest question, if we get to total depth, if they put $1 in, are they going to pull $2 or $3 out? Or are they going to pull $8 or $9 out? That's typically the biggest question that they're going to have, because the oil market, it might go down in the interim. It might go fluctuate. It's going to. However, when you look at the raw numbers, it's simple supply and demand. If demand is through the roof and supply is restricted, what is going to happen to prices? Every time they're going to go up. And so park your money in something that you know has the possibility of going up tremendously. I tell my guys that, look, here we have wells that they'll produce for 20, 30, some of them for 40 years. And they produce in stages. There's multiple zones in the well, and we produce it from the bottom up. Well, we just hit a well here a couple of months ago, and I was explaining to one of my partners, I said, look, there's 8 zones in this well. The bottom 3 zones, they're okay. They're solid. We think there's 100, maybe 200,000 barrels in those 3 zones. However, the best zone on the logs is the 4th one from the bottom. Well, the first zone we're going to produce is not that 4th one from the bottom. We're going to produce the deepest, because most likely you're not going back down after you go back up. It's just too difficult. You'll most likely lose the well. Well, that's 150,000 barrels of oil. We're not going to just leave it there to get the best zone. So we're going to produce those bottom 3 zones first. It's probably going to take us 10, 15 years to produce it all. Well, once that oil is gone, then we're going to hit the biggest and best zone on the well. What happens if that zone comes in at 100, 200 barrels a day? Now, here's the kicker. What do you think oil prices are going to be 15 years from now? If we do what some of these morons in DC want to do, it's going to be $300 a barrel. However, simply looking at supply and demand, I would be shocked if it wasn't at least 100. Well, if you have $100 a barrel and you're making 100, 200 barrels a day, you're now making anywhere from 80 to 200% annually on an investment you made 15 years ago.
That makes sense.
And then you look at the tax benefits there. It's the best tax benefits out there. I mean, Uncle
This
Sam
is
lets you write
absolutely
off
fascinating.
roughly a third of your investment. It's an above line deduction. I'm not a CPA, a lot of my partners, what they do is they'll spend the first 10 months of the year utilizing their money however they want to. They'll call their accountant in November, find out how much they owe in taxes, and they'll call me in December to offset those taxes.
Amazing. Amazing. I want to bring it back though to your company. I mean, I want to shine a light on the work. I mean, that's why you're here today, because I want to make sure, one, people get to know you. I love I love this conversation. So informative. But you want to accomplish something at Panex. So tell us a little bit more about, what do you want to accomplish with your company?
Well, the fact is, nobody climbed Mount Everest until they first decided to climb it. And when I look at the American oil industry and I look at the fact that it's roughly 9,000 independent companies that average 12 employees or less, that's our competition. That's not our competition. Is not Exxon. It's not the big boys. It's companies just like mine. And it's happened one time, but over the last 40 years, and that one time was when 2 companies merged. But coming from scratch, there hasn't been one oil and gas company that has reached the major oil and gas company status of 100 million market cap based strictly on American oil in 40 years. So with everything that's going on, COVID taught me really a really important lesson. If a country doesn't control its food, its medicine, or its energy, somebody else does. I can't do much about food. That's not my expertise. I can't do much about medicine. That's not my expertise either. I can do something about energy. And so I'm not the only one who sees this. I can promise you that. Somebody's going to come out and consolidate all this oil. Somebody's going to come out and buy all these companies and all their reserves, and they're going to consolidate and put it under one roof. Well, why not us? If it's going to be done anyway, why not us? We've already got what we believe is a 100 million barrel start. We want to turn it into 1 billion barrels. And that's just acquiring reserves. Now, what we do to do that, we love salt domes. And the reason we love salt domes, it's basically a big formation of salt that pushes up in the ground, and it's an oil reservoir. Well, salt domes were the original oil fields. Back in the Wild West days of oil, salt domes were the first geological structure that your geologists back then could identify. Your spindle tops, a lot of your old big fields were salt dome wells. And the beauty of these old companies is a lot of them were Well, for basically lack of a better term, they're like spoiled kids, where a spoiled kid's favorite toy is their next toy. And so what they would do, they'd go out, drill a well in the spot, hit it. They're cutting back flips. They found oil. Over the next couple of years, they'd drill 40, 50 wells surrounding it. And then all of a sudden, they'd hit a well 5 miles away. Well, we produced all the oil here. They just pick up and move their operations to that different location. Well, how much oil did they leave behind? In a lot of cases, companies come in over the next 100 some odd years and developed all of it. However, there are over 600 salt domes across the Gulf Coast. There's a lot of them with a lot of oil left behind that was not fully developed. You take the Choctaw. When you hear them talk about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, that's our salt dome. We own the roughly 3,000 acres surrounding. And when we acquire a property, the first thing we do is we gather every bit of data you can gather on that property. When you drill a well, when you're finished, the first thing you do when you're finished is you run a log on that well. You drop a little geophone down the hole, and it gives you the reading. It tells you what you have in your well. Well, a log run in 1940 provides basically the same data that a log run in 2024 provides. Now, yes, we get a few more data points, and yes, our logs are prettier because our computers and printers are better. However, the basic raw data, the resistivity, the permeability, the porosity is the same. And all of this information is public information if you know where to look. And so we acquired this property. It's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. When we acquired it, we pulled 40,000 different data sets on this property, and we got all the logs that we could get on every well that was drilled out there. Now, the reason you do that, you want to look through these logs and build a field profile. Like on this field, when you look through those logs, you'll see the average well, successful well, will have anywhere from 3 to 7 different pay sands, anywhere from, say, 500,000 barrels of oil to maybe 1.5 million barrels of oil. That's going to be your average successful well out here. And so you're looking through these logs and you see one, see another, see another. Well, then all of a sudden you see a log that looks just like the others. Beautiful stacked pay sands, should have anywhere from 500,000 to 1.5 million barrels of oil. But then you look at the production report and they produce 40,000 barrels. You go, I wonder why. So you kind of set that one aside and you keep going through them. Well, then we saw another one. Then we saw another one and another one. When we got done going through all that data, there were several dozen of these logs that were beautiful logs, should have had a lot of oil in it with very little production. Well, when we researched it and figured out why, there were really 2 reasons why: gluttony and sand. Gluttony in the sense that I'm not sure, but for whatever reason, when these guys drilled these wells, they wanted to produce as much oil as they could, as fast as they could. So they would turn those wells wide open and just let them go. Well, that problem right there led to the second problem. These wells also produce sand. Think of it this way. If you had a big gulp in front of you with crushed ice and Coke in it with no lid, and you wanted to just drink the ice or the Coke, you didn't want any of the ice to get in your mouth. When you drank it, you'd have to block it with your lip or teeth and gently drink it just to get the Coke. That's how you have to produce these wells. Well, that's the exact opposite of what these guys did. They just opened their mouth and poured the Coke and ice straight in. And so what happens is your beautiful well that's producing a lot of oil, all of a sudden they look up and it's turned into a 5,000-foot column of cement. Well, they didn't know how to deal with the sand. So they would just pack it up and walk away at that point. There was no fixing it. Well, all they did was showed us where the oil was at, showed us that it can be produced, and showed us where we need to drill a well. And so that's all we do. I would love to say our philosophy is much more complicated than that, but it's not. That's all we do. We go to where proven production is, and we get what they left behind.
Absolutely.
We develop fields to an extent that they've never been developed before.
So definitely clear on what differentiates you, and you're definitely seeing the opportunity and going with it. But before I just switch, I'm going to really switch gears. You've got a couple guitars in the background there. How does music play into you and your life?
That's my shutdown. That's normally when I have my best ideas. There's 2 places that I shut down: when I'm playing the guitar, when I'm riding a motorcycle. And typically that's my time where I'll have a book or something in my ears, or I'm playing my guitar, not thinking of anything, not thinking of the notes, just kind of playing. Mm-hmm. That I just let my mind relax, and that's normally where most of my ideas come from.
Yeah, music stirs my soul as well. When I want to go to a creative place, I just turn the music on and all of a sudden great ideas flow. So I appreciate that.
Oh, well, I'm kind of nerdy. I love that it's math, that everything in music is measured. I love the order to it. And once you know the order, then the creativity, and then that's where all that comes in. And that's what I love about it, is that it transcribes language. It goes from world to world. Everybody knows if a song's in tune.
Mm,
And math tells you that.
beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So, we're here today again just to provide just some amazing insights for my listeners. And I'm absolutely fascinated by the industry that you're in, but you're also here to connect with people. So, I'm wondering, who is it that you want to connect with? Or if not my listeners direct, they may know somebody. So, you're doing these podcasts to reach out to others, create
Mhm.
awareness, and also maybe bring in people to your sphere. So, who do you want to connect with because of doing this show?
Well, our target audience is the accredited investor, the guy who has been successful, who has busted his butt, is making money, and needs tax benefits and revenue. As I mentioned here a little earlier, the oil industry, the tax benefits for drilling an oil well, I truly believe they're the best in the business. Now, once again, I'm not a CPA. You have to let a CPA give you an expert opinion. I can give you a general rule of thumb. If somebody invests 100,000 in a drilling program, cash on cash, you're going to get anywhere from a $30,000 to $35,000 write off in the first year. Basically, if you owe Uncle Sam 150,000 at the end of the year, and you put 100,000 in a drilling program, you're now going to owe Uncle Sam 115,000 that year. It's in a direct above line deduction.
Mm,
Now, tax benefits are not the reason to do oil and gas. Uh, don't get me wrong. I'd be naive not to mention what kind of a benefit they are. But the reason you do oil and gas is to make money. And what we try to do, we know the market, and we know that with the wells we are drilling, we are able to put our partners in as close a repeatable action as you can put. And that's really all I dream of. Now, the biggest issue doing what we have sometimes is when you acquire a field like that, a lot of the times, the most wells you have are 15, maybe 20 wells. At the far outside, maybe 30 wells to develop the entire field. Well, in this Choctaw, we have over 200 wells that we're going to need to drill to develop this entire holding. And looking at it on math, we believe it'll be anywhere from 2 to 300 million to develop the entire field. Well, if we're right, it's $70 oil, we'll turn that 300 million into 7 billion. If we're wrong 5 times over, we still turn that 300 million to 350 million. And so all we're doing, like I said, we stand on the shoulders of giants and go and get what they left behind. The last 5 partnerships we've run, projecting out and looking at the reservoir reports, these partnerships will best case, the best partnership out there will make the partners 8, 9 to 1 on their money. The worst partnership out there is looking at 2 to 3 to 1 on their money. And we've done all the work. Now we just have to go produce the oil. Now, are there going to be hiccups? Are there going to be wells we miss? Are there going to be things that happen? Yes, this is oil and gas. Now, what we do is the fact that my dad taught me a long time ago, boy, without your partners, you don't have a business. And so every decision we make has one foundational principle alone. Is it good for the partners? And if it's not good for the partners, we're not going to do it. Doesn't matter how good it is for us, because without our partners, we're not where we're at, and we're not able to do what we love doing. And so, well, and let's put it in the monetary capitalistic wording. I'm greedy. I want the biggest house, the biggest car, and the biggest dog. I have no problem. People know who I am. I'm a type A. That's what I want to do. Well, the only way I get to my goals is to win for my partners. I have to make them money first. Our partners make 100% of the revenue on their partnerships until they have their money back in their pocket. Once they're cashed out, then we come back in. And so I don't do that to is really any other statement other than I want my partners to know that I'm in the boat paddling with them. And it's amazing how much harder you paddle when you're in the boat with somebody versus standing on the shore telling them how to paddle. And so that's what we do. We now, to help people out, going through this educational side that I've been going through, I've come to realize that a lot of people really don't know about oil. And to help those individuals out, we created a website, panex.us/learn, that basically has our oil and gas 101, just a basic foundation oil and gas information. And then we have oil and gas 102, which is basically the tax benefits and break those down. We have videos explaining what we do, why we do it, just give you insight into us, because here's how I look at it. When I'm talking with an individual, we run a Reg D 506C program, which means every partner has to be third party verified accredited investor. And the reason we do that is, like I said, I can never remove all the risk from oil. And I tell my guys, look, if something happens and the world opens up and swallows my company, I lose every dime you send us other than the tax benefits. I'm not saying we wouldn't be upset. However, would it change the clothes you wear, the car you drive, or the food you eat? And if the answer to that is yes, then don't do it. You're not big enough to do oil. However, when we put our partners in a position where they understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, they can put the money out there and let us go to work, gain the tax benefits, then you're able to take advantage of one of the best markets that's ever existed. As I said earlier, oil's created more wealth than any industry out there. And heck, Uncle Sam doesn't give you a tax benefit because he likes you.
Mm-hmm.
He does it because we need the oil. And so keep an eye on that. Educate yourself, whether it's with me. I truly believe if you're in a proper financial position, you're making a mistake if you don't have some of your portfolio in oil, because it's what drives the world.
Fascinating conversation. And I'll just take one of the last things you were saying is, if it doesn't resonate with your partners, it's not in their best interest, don't do it. I think it's a great guiding principle when we are in business or in a corporate environment making certain decisions. It's not about you and the impact on you, but think about the impact on others. And if that's a guiding principle, it really does help you in making the right decisions. So, really great insights. I've got to bring this interview to a close. Absolutely fascinating. Any last thoughts you want to share with the audience before we say thank you?
Yeah, well, Deb, basically here's how I look at it. I call it the three factors. There are three factors standing between me and anybody out there doing business. The first factor is their responsibility. The second two factor is solely my responsibility. The factor that is their responsibility is the money. I can't tell them how much they have. I can't tell them how much they can invest. I can't tell them if this is something for them or not. Now, once I know that this is something they can financially handle, we'll put a positive next to it. I won't address it again. Now it relies squarely on me and my two factors. The first and most important, who are we? RJ Burr, Panex, the Burr family. Why are we people you want on your team? If you couldn't envision yourself breaking bread with me and my family, I'll be the first one to tell you, don't do it. Now, the reason that is important is because anybody can quote crazy numbers. Anybody can run and say, hey, I can make you 100 to 1 over the next 3 years. Well, if you don't see that that's somebody you should listen to, it's irrelevant. So we want you to see that we're the kind of people you want on your team first. Now, once you see that, then what can we do for you financially? Of the millions of places in the world where you can put your hard-earned investment dollars, that is the most sacred decision you can make in business, placing your money with somebody. Most people didn't come to their money easy. Most people had to sacrifice for it. Most people had to miss a dinner with the family or miss a ballet recital for work. They had to pay that price. Well, when somebody decides to take what they paid a price to earn and put it with you, that's the most sacred decision you can make in business. Why am I somebody who deserves that? What does the math behind what we're doing make sense for you and your family? And then at that point, it's very simple. If we have a positive on all three factors, we'll do business. If we have a negative on any one of them, and it can take any shape, form you want. I want to talk to my wife, talk to my lawyer, talk to my CPA, talk to my school teacher, whatever. When you follow it back down to the root of that objection, it's going to be one of those three factors was negative. And so that's what we base our world around.
RJ, I have thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Your industry, you, your family, absolutely fascinating. And I just love all the nuggets about living life, the business, values, making the right decisions, investing with partners has been very valuable to me. So I want to wish you well, the Panex family, much success. And again, thank you so much for dropping in on the podcast.
Oh, Deb, thank you for having me.